Welcome to the Samson Strength Coach Collective. On today's episode, we have Zane Scott, Director of Olympic Strength and Conditioning at Florida Atlantic University. Zane was fantastic to speak with. A really cool experience he had, obviously, was working with Florida Atlantic University basketball 2 years ago, going to the Final Four, which was just an electric March Madness as a whole. But then to see what his team did, we kind of break down that process and what it was like for him to experience that. He says it himself, it's quote unquote mid major, just like App State. In the expectation is that you can just get to the tournament versus now going all the way to the Final Four. It's pretty historic. I think people are aware of that, but not really aware of how crazy that is, and how great of a job they did leading up to it. And then we just dive into a bunch of other things. You can tell that Zane is a coach who really wants to be successful and will do whatever it takes, which is, a lot of coaches' stories, but in his, it's very evident with how he approached his path to strength and conditioning and how he got to where he is currently. A really humble guy, really fantastic to speak with. As always, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy. What's going on, Samson Strength Coach Collective listeners? On today's episode, we have the Director of Olympic Strength and Conditioning at FAU, Zane Scott. Zane, thank you for coming on, man.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it anytime.
So I had to tell a story before we even start because I think it's always funny, right? So Zane calls me from an area code very familiar to my heart, right? It's upstate New York area code. So we talked a little bit and just talked about upstate New York, what it was like living there. You're Rochester, correct?
Yep.
Okay. And so I'm from Syracuse, right by each other. And then so while we're discussing it, Zane kind of all of a sudden brings up, he's like, hey, by the way, like, were you at this specific event in this year? Were you at Tennessee football at the time? And I was like, yeah, I've been there. And we talked about it. Turns out that we actually met for the first time, like, 5-6 years ago now at one of
Yep.
these conferences. And then it's all coming back together now.
Yeah, no, it was. I remember it vividly. I don't remember your name, or I didn't remember exactly
Yeah.
where you were from, or anything like that. But I was at Wingate at the time, and I was down with that staff, and
Yep.
I just remember they always used to make fun of me. They're like, "Oh, 7 degrees of Zane Scott. You can find a connection anywhere," because we were standing in line for food, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, oh you're from upstate New York." I just overheard it, and so for whatever reason, I remembered that. And then when you're talking about at Tennessee football, you interned. I'm like putting together the timeline. I'm like, I think I met this dude a long time ago. So yeah, it's ironic.
It's just funny, man, and I love the pipeline of upstate New York people moving out of there too, right? Our families always stay, but my fiance makes fun of me all the time. She's like, "You've met 7 million people from upstate New York," and I'm like, "Yeah, everybody moves because it's just cold and, and terrible weather. Like they like getting out of there." So Boca Raton is quite the change for you.
Yeah, but it's the sixth borough down here, so it's all New York City people. You can't get away. You can't get away from New Yorkers, man. When I was living in North Carolina at Wingate, it's the same deal. Everybody's from upstate New York, Rochester, Bills fans everywhere. There's
Oh
garbage
yeah,
plate trucks. I'm like, dude, like, did I even move? It's just warmer and it's the same people. So yeah, it's weird how we travel.
but it's just a common denominator amongst friends. That's always just a good thing. Great talking point, like you said.
For sure.
Well, can you give us your background in strength and conditioning and then what's brought you to FAU?
Yeah, I guess from the beginning. So obviously from Rochester, New York. Played sports in high school. Everybody's got the same origin story, right? And you weren't good enough, or you were just good enough to play college sports. So I ran track at Ithaca College for 3 years. And my last year, I actually played rugby. So I did my undergrad there. Clinical exercise science was my degree. Interned at Cornell, and then from there graduated. Worked at a private institution that's now closed in Webster, New York. And while I was there, living with the folks, doing grad school online, just grinding, man, just learning how to coach and all walks of life. We had 6-year-old hockey teams up to Gen Pop, and then in between you'd have a pro, and a pro was training with a 16-year-old volleyball girl. Like, it was all over the place. So it was baptism by fire, but it was a good way to learn. And then from there, went to Wingate. Was the assistant sports performance coach. We had 23 sports, I think, including football, and that was learning how to grind and love it and all that. And then from Wingate, made a connection while I was there. Connected me to the University of Florida. Was assistant strength and conditioning coach for men's basketball. Was a head strength coach for men's golf. Had men's tennis for a little bit. left for UMass, and then was there for 9 months, and then went back to Florida. And then from Florida, I went to UMKC. I was assistant AD, took it for a great title, made good money, lived in downtown Kansas City, absolutely loved it, had men's and women's basketball. Was there for about 8 months, and we went through 2 coaching changes at the same time, men's and women's, 2 weeks apart. It was absolutely nuts. I got retained by both staffs. They both kind of had to say if they wanted to keep me, and they heard good things, which was awesome from my previous staffs. Um, and I decided, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna feel them out. So I was there for about a month, and then I got a call from Coach Dusty May at that time to come back to Florida. And I was like, man, just match my salary. Like, I'm not a Midwest guy. It was great. I loved Kansas City, but it was far from home for sure. And there's something about Florida I just loved with the weather. I had a great experience at University of Florida. There's a lot of Florida connects here. Both Dusty, obviously, coached there. We did not cross paths there, but I coached his son, Jack, at Florida. And then the golf coach here was Mark Leon, who's now the head golf coach at Penn State. He was an assistant golf coach at Florida when I had golf. So there was they called me like 2 hours apart, and I don't even think they talked to each other. That was the weirdest part. It was like, hey, do you want to come to FAU? And I'm like, yeah, I'll consider it. And I thought about it more, and I'm like, man, it's really accessible for my parents. My parents would come visit for a month when I was in Gainesville, come to all the games. It was a really, really good fit. I didn't see it though. So I didn't even come on campus. And so when I took the job, I came in and I saw the weight room. There's holes in the floor and the bars are bent. And I'm like, yo, what did I just do? Like, this is crazy. But since then, man, being the director, we've grown our department. We just redid our room. Shout out to Samson.
There
I
you
know,
go.
maybe not allowed to give them a hype on their own podcast. It's kind of corny, but, obviously they did our racks. They did most of our equipment, benches, all that stuff. And so we just redid the room. It's unbelievable. And it's been great so far for 2 years.
I always hype up Sanson when I get the chance, right? Because they are a little low key. They're
Yep.
very humble people when you meet them, but you just see the product and what you can get out of it. I mean, it's incredible. I went on a whole rant when I came back from CSCCA about how great they were.
Oh, it was unbelievable, like start to finish. When you're redoing a room, you're kind of like on the lonely island, just trying to figure out like, I got to be an architect and a strength coach. And all right, well, I have basketball who's got 14 kids, and then baseball comes in, they have 40 kids. So how can I get what I need out of the room while also providing that for my other coaches and everybody, on campus can kind of get the same sort of training session, and then you're limited by size and this and that. So they're really patient with me. I think, we probably did 15 or 20 quotes with addendums and all that stuff. It was a long process, but they were really patient and helpful.
Yep, I'm trying to go through the same process myself, but we'll keep that one under wraps.
Man,
um,
get the racks, man. The
yeah,
racks
yeah,
are, oh my gosh. Like, that was the thing working in basketball. If you've been at a high level, a SEC level or whatever, you have basketball only weight room. And with that comes the ability to have unique pieces, right? And, so that way you can fit it to the athletes in terms of size and height, or, hey, this guy can't squat with a barbell today, but we have a pendulum squat or a hack squat, or you can't do that in an Olympic room in most places, right? Just because of size and, the ability to put cable stacks in the racks and so we have all this apparatus in one room it's really unique. And
mm.
it's helped us tremendously.
And that's the interesting piece with basketball players too, right? Is you can look at certain pieces of equipment that I typically would not ever consider necessary, right? But all of a sudden you have somebody who's 7 feet tall and just crazy, crazy build, and so now we have to find unique tools for this because it's a unique person. So that's why I love basketball myself personally. I mean, we can talk basketball all day, but to actually be able to use the cool, fun tools, right, that you can access and it's necessary to use them. I think it's always the best part about basketball.
No, 100%. And yeah, I got into it for the same reason, because it's all the hard work that you learn early on in your career of, just training and coaching and working and working and working. But now it's like, okay, I have a team of 15 people. I have to apply the same work ethic to 15 people. So the focus is that much more. And like you said, they're unique individuals in terms of what their ability is and their specific sport, and obviously how they're built. That's the biggest thing, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's the puzzle piece of figuring out how to make a 7-footer squat all the way down. Like it's fascinating, and it's vastly beneficial to the kid, but it keeps me coming back for sure.
It was funny because you actually had a player on your team who I first met my first year at Tech, and massive kid, right? And just learning, like seeing, watching him learn how to just use his body was insane. And that was kind of my first exposure to it. I always had women's basketball, and we didn't have anybody taller than 6'5", so I didn't really have to approach or kind of use that. Uh, uh, I guess solve that problem. And then all of a sudden I'm now in men's basketball, and he was the first person I thought of when we got one of our guys who came in who's 6'11". Like those things were crazy for me to actually understand how to work with those guys. But then once you develop them, you see a massive change in their confidence on the court as well too, because sometimes they just don't know how to use their bodies.
Yeah, the baby deer syndrome, right? We
Yeah.
just try to get away from the baby deer syndrome as fast as we can. Because the cool thing is that as much as there's a direct correlation between track and football in the weight room, and people kind of shy away from the weight room, or used to anyway, in terms of basketball. There's been a massive shift because you can see just such a gain. And one coach told me, he's like, how I judge a good strength coach is if my guys start falling down less, which is kind of subjective, right? But I kind of get the point, right? Point being is, that they had the kind of that baby deer. They just didn't know how to use their body in space, the kinesthetic awareness, obviously, lower body strength. You can go down the rabbit hole physiologically in terms of adaptation, but the eye test of, hey, can you actually stand up and play basketball?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
pretty
yeah.
low level, but it goes a long way.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because we had Alex Cost on. He's one of the G League strength coaches for the Sixers, and he came on and talked about that exact issue was helping somebody not fall all the time, right? Because this person just continually fell, all of a sudden wouldn't be able to get back in transition, and you're playing 5-on-4, and you just can't have that. So he just talked about that process, and he even opened my mind to it a little bit because like we had some guys fall before. I'm like, man, this guy's just not going to figure it out. Like he just falls, man. I don't know what to tell you. But it's interesting what you can actually use and develop. The baby deer, when you bring it up, that does strike a chord with me because we've got one guy on our team who's the nicest. I love him to death, and he works so hard. He just struggled to put on some weight, and then even like Phil Beckner one day watched film on the guy and was like, "Yeah, he's like a baby deer, man. He just needs to figure out the weight room and everything." And I'm sitting there, just like, God, man, like, come on. I'm trying my hardest. Like it's been 2 years of us working together. I'm trying everything I can to get this guy to gain weight and get in the weight room. And so it's just when you brought that up, I just had a quick PTSD flashback to that quote.
I love
Yeah.
it.
Well, you tapped on early in your career just a little bit, right, about the hard work and kind of the dedication that it took to actually be able to be in a position you're at now. When you were in private sector, was college always the goal? Did you know that you wanted to be a college strength coach? And did you know it was going to be basketball in the future?
1,000% on the college side of things. I knew I wanted to get back. Obviously, I had a great internship at Cornell when I was in undergrad, and that place was like a revolving door. You had a team every hour on the hour, every part of the day, and it never felt like it got old. Um,
Mm,
so it definitely was something I wanted to get back to. The only thing was I wasn't in a financial position, to take an unpaid internship. I wasn't able to move across the country, and I didn't really have connections. So obviously that's how most people get started is in undergrad. They know they want to be a strength coach. They do summer internships. We had an intern that went fully online for his senior year just so he could intern because he knew that would put him ahead. I didn't really have that guidance. So I was just trying to figure it out as I went, and I just knew I wanted to coach. So I took whatever job I could get, and that was in July, right after I had graduated, got my CACS, had my USAW, and I'm like, all right, I know I have to get a master's. So I probably applied to in an 18-month period, 150 jobs, 200 jobs, I don't even know, between assistant positions, GA positions, this, that, and the other thing. And once they're posted, they're already filled. I didn't know that when I was, 22 years old. So I knew I wanted to get back to college. And so when I finished my master's in sports admin, I actually took a hard pivot and I moved to Utah. And I did it for like 4 or 5 months. I worked for the U.S. Golf Association, and I had a paid internship. I was doing sports admin stuff. I just needed to finish my degree. It was an unbelievable way and a good excuse to get out of New York and kind of figure it out from there. And I remember my interview with Wingate. I finally got a call, and I was like, man, I haven't coached in like 4 months. I got to like figure this out. I've been on a golf course, like kicking it for 4 months. So I'm sitting in a Sprouts parking lot, 100-degree day. The director called me like 20 minutes late. I'm just baking in this Volkswagen that's like half beaten up, broke down. Everybody's got these like origin stories. And, I didn't know how to feel about it. So I did the interview and I'm like, oh man, I crushed it. So he calls me back the next day, and he's like, hey, and I had already planned to move back to New York because I didn't have a job in Utah anymore. So I'm driving back to New York to move, 33-hour drive, and he calls me. He says, hey, how does $400 a month sound
Oh,
in a stipend? You're going to live with 10 guys. You're going to
oh,
have a meal plan. What he didn't tell me about the meal plan is that, well, we work from 6 to noon, so breakfast is out the window. I had from 12 to 1, and then I could eat dinner at like 7. So I got two
oh.
meals in the dining hall, but he hooked me up with a little side gig, so I made some money. But I mean, I lived in basically a frat house. And like I said, man, like I was like, all right, this is the test. And I was going to tell him no. I'm like, bro, I have a master's degree. I have experience both in college and private. Like I'm basically running my own sessions, this, that, and the other thing. And so I called my friend Ty, and he was a strength coach. He was interning at Syracuse at the time. And I called him. I said, man, I'm not taking it. I'm not taking it. And he goes, do you have any other offers? And I said, no. Nah. And he goes, looks like you're taking it. And so I'm like, damn. So I took it. I just took it. I moved to North Carolina, and I had the best experience ever, man. I had, 5 teams myself. I assisted with football. We had basketball. We had baseball, and it was like a factory. I had more coaching hours probably than anybody in the country. I mean, it was a great 9 months, and shout out to those guys for taking me under their wing and teaching me how to be a strength coach. And from there, I didn't know what to do. It's better to be a generalist first and then figure it out. I learned how to work hard. I learned how to coach. I learned what was important. He always said, he's a Southern dude. He's like, don't major in the minor, don't major in the minors. And I'm like, what is this dude talking about? And I finally figured it out, right? It's just like, okay, focus on the big things, and then, where you can add things and where you can make small changes later on. Worry about it, but teach the kids how to train hard, show up every day, be consistent as a coach, and you'll kind of figure it out. And then I kind of got thrust into basketball. I just had a connection, a very organic connection to a guy named Blake Bender. He works for Lumen Sports now. He was the director at Cal for men's basketball, and at the time, he was the director at Charlotte for men's basketball. And we became friends. And he was like, "Dude, what are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Man, yeah, I had no connections. I took whatever job I could get." And so he called Preston Green, who was at Florida at the time, and said, "Hey, do you need an assistant?" And that was that. And then I was in basketball. I was a basketball guy, and did it by accident.
I love this is my exact same origin story, right? And I can identify 100% because I remember being on a beach when I was at Tennessee. It was like 4 o'clock, and we've already been out on the beach all day. I get a call, and it was like, "Hey, are you interested in Texas Tech women's basketball?" And I literally laughed. I was like, "That's funny." Like I'm not. Like why would you joke with me on the beach? He's like, "No, I'm actually dead serious." I was like, "Yeah, 1,000% I'm interested." And so he's like, "All right, she might call you the next day." So we're driving the whole time back from Florida all the way up to Knoxville. And then as we're going up, I get a call. And so I pull into the Ramada Inn in Macon, Georgia. And like, it's one of those calls where like you can like just barely hear like 75% of what the coach is saying. It was like, yeah, I really focus. And that's going to be, and so I'm just trying to piece it together. And I'm like, yeah, 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 absolutely. And so like I give my answers and I'm like, well, that was horrible. That was about as bad as it could possibly get. And so I had almost the exact opposite reaction. But we, ended up obviously being able to work out there. But those are always super fun stories to tell. And what I like about your story too is understanding that there is going to be a process where you are going to have to grind. I think there's been kind of a big push of, which I think is totally valid, knowing your worth and understanding exactly what you can provide. Right. But at the same time, if exactly like your friend said, if you don't have other offers, like you got to take what's going to be available. Like if you really want to be within this field, ultimately there's things that we can advocate for and we can change. But with the state of how it is right now, for some young coaches who may be listening, like you might have to take kind of a sour deal. Like I didn't get paid and you didn't get paid, probably your first 2 years. Right. And so that part sucks, but I'll advocate for paying interns as much as possible. But at the same time, like, you can't pass up on opportunities because you never know what's going to actually get you connected, right? You go to Wingate, so now you become friends with the strength coach over at Charlotte, and then all of a sudden that completely changes your career trajectory just because you're willing and open to do something that kind of sucked.
Yeah, no, 1,000%. And I think I 1,000% agree with the adage of, trying to get paid interns and stuff like that, because I do agree it is a tough deal. Like you are at least doing minimum wage work if you're cleaning,
Yeah.
like it's at least minimum wage work. That doesn't require any education background, but obviously you're there to coach and learn. So I wish we could do that and wish we could provide that. But at the same time, it's as we get further in the field, as guys that have gone through it, it's kind of our job to protect our people from that. And that's what I've tried to instill. We talked before we got on here about my GA. Well, I got my GA to get full time, and that doesn't happen all the time. But I said, hey, also you need to have some control over this, and you need to try and get other jobs, because that's the only way that I'm going to really be able to do this. Because you're great and people want to keep you here and all this stuff, but that's ultimately, it says, hey, you provide value. That's the only way that administration sees that you provide value, if externally someone thinks you provide value as well. Because it's too subjective internally. Oh yeah, we like her. Okay, but you can't tell me that she or he is a good strength coach objectively. Or if you do, I don't know what you're talking about, right? If someone else is trying to poach them, that's where they provide value. So I try to protect my people and my staff as much as I can from that, and provide as much opportunity as possible. But I'll also tell them to go when they need to go, and
Yeah.
say, hey, you need to go take that job. Hey, you need to go interview for that job, because I don't think we'll ever be able to match it. So
Oh yeah, we had a position open here, and there was somebody I immediately called, and I was like, "Hey, this needs to be you. Actually, like, there's no other like
mhm.
this. You're going to be my guy." And we talked through the details and everything, and he was just like, "Well, I just don't know." And I said, "Well, all right, if you can't do the opportunity, I understand it 100%. But like, hopefully that can help you out of your school, right?" And the same thing, like you said, the external value of me saying, "Hey, you need to come." I'm recruiting a GA over here. First of all, I give him hell for this all the time. Imagine turning down a GA opportunity, right? Like you're negotiating being a GA. Like I was like, all right, you're just in a different world right now than me, because you're probably a better strength coach than I am at this point. And then nobody argued over me when I was a GA. But regardless, he was able to get a better position and improve his status at the place he was currently at, because there was that external draw. It's almost like it's like almost like a bad relationship, like with administration sometimes, because it's like unless you're looking elsewhere, and you hear something else from externally, they're not going to be willing to give you that raise. And so it's interesting. I talked with Scott Charlin about the same concept last week. Like you do have to be, first of all, the most important thing is negotiating your salary up front for somebody in our position who has had multiple jobs and can negotiate those things, because it's easier to get it up front than it is later. But
Mhm.
at the same time, you also have to be willing to move and do the things that you've done. I've moved a ton as well too, and I think it's set us up in better positions in places I like being, and give us good opportunities, because you're willing to move and you understand that sometimes it's not about just staying at the same spot and working your way up 100% through it. That's not the most accurate picture you can paint.
Yeah, 1,000%. I mean, people talk about how many moves they've made in 6, 7, and 5 states, and like my story. You're at Florida, you go to UMass, you go back to Florida, and it's all, you could say it's all for trying to increase your worth and take the next step in your career. But really, at the end of the day, when you go through it long enough, like I'm old and sappy now, is like you just have to find where you're valued. You have to find where people appreciate you, and you have to find where you're happy inside and outside of work. Because at the end of the day, I think that's why people will last in this field. I think why people burn out is they try to always constantly take oh, how's this job going to help me? How's this job going to help me? How's this job going to help me? What's the job I can get after this job? It's like, man, if you find a place and you really pour into it and you exhaust yourself and say, all right, I made this place better, and it's time to move on, it's time to move on.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if you're always chasing that big one, you might get the big one fast, but you're not going to stay in it long, or you're going to feel like you got the bad end of the deal, or maybe you took a job and it's a coach's contract year and you get let go, even though it's not your fault, right? You just have to play your cards right and just try to make it big time where you're at. And me and you being in kind of quote unquote mid majors, if you can make it a really really good job, and then you can be picky about what job
Yeah.
and what big job you take.
Yeah, we were even just talking about that on pre-show just a little bit, right? Like, I love App State, I love being here, and so I can be extremely picky, and so it's been a great situation for me, and obviously my fiance working here makes a difference as well too. We're mountaineers all the way, but if you can make that situation good for yourself and you can make it fit, that's the best thing possible for you, and then you can determine your next steps there. You know, you talk about working with Preston Green. That's a very famous name within the basketball strength and conditioning world and just strength and conditioning as a whole. And we had Pat on previously over from Charlotte, one of your good friends. How was your experience working for Preston? What was the value you were able to get out of that assistant position?
Man, we could talk about that for days probably. It's just the thing I appreciate most about any field is being around people that do everything at an elite level. And in terms of, at the University of Florida, it's not just Preston Green that was at elite level. Coach White was at an elite level. Every assistant coach was at elite level. Our custodian was at an elite level, and that's what made that place so special for me, in terms of my careers, because everybody was so focused on what they needed to do day in and day out and had tunnel vision on their specific job that it allowed everybody else to do their job that much better. And that was what I took away from that and totality, and what I try to kind of implement on the daily. Now, the X's and O's of strength and conditioning, like Preston is the best I've ever been around, in terms of just his attention to detail, um, the education that he provides for others, and he sought out, internationally, from personal trainers and strength coaches to come learn from him, just because of his relationship with Charles Poliquin, and how long he's been involved in kind of that tree. So from an X's and O's standpoint and nutrition standpoint, and the theoretical science behind things, it was kind of mind blowing. But luckily I knew how to work hard. Luckily I knew how to be well read prior to going there, because it made it that much easier to understand and consume, what he was trying to provide. Because Preston doesn't provide critical thinking skills. He tells you what he wants. He tells you how it's going to be, and you do it, right? As an assistant, you just help him. And then, it's up to you to kind of take what, he's teaching you and critically apply it to the teams you had. So I had men's golf, and it was like, okay, how can I implement what he does at his level with a different size team in this room that's kind of got some constraints because it's made for basketball, in terms of size. And we did groups there at Florida. I had the whole golf team, 15 guys at once. So it just looks a little different. And so that's the piece that I needed to bring, on the front end, was having the critical thinking skills to break down what he was doing without asking him. And then also having the nuts to go up and ask him, because everybody's terrified of him there. Like, they were absolutely terrified. Don't bother him. Don't bother him. And I'm like, I'll walk into his office and sit down right now. Like, I don't, what I mean? And just kind of drill him on questions. And I think that's why me and him got close, was because he appreciated that I was willing to do that. Because he would, private lecture to me, or I would sit in on the lecture when he would make these people pay thousands of dollars to come learn from him. And so it was unbelievable. And then, Pat being part of it, it was during COVID. So, it's train the guys, train ourselves, go to Whole Foods, go home. Like, I mean, you couldn't do anything because you were so terrified that you were going to get sick and bring the whole program down with you. So, we got really close that year because there was no other option. We had to spend a lot of time together, and it was unbelievable. But the most I learned from him was watching him train at 43 years old and just grinding out reps. Like, he's impressive, man. He's really impressive.
Well, the aspect I really like about what he does, and what certain other older strength coaches do within the field, right? Not older to be derogatory, but just people who've been in the field for a while. I worked for Craig Fitzgerald at Tennessee, right? Who's a pretty well known football strength coach. And these are guys who've been training forever and running teams forever. They understand the importance of developing strength coaches in the future as well too, right? And they understand that their duty is also to make sure that future strength coaches are going to be successful and people who have gone through their programs. I think that point can kind of get lost sometimes, or I think it's not something that's 100% required from strength coaches to specifically say, okay, well, my job is to develop this intern and develop these GAs as best as possible. Some people take it more literally and take just the side of, okay, I just want to focus on the lifting, and I need somebody here to help me kind of clean up, and mark down our testing numbers or whatever in the time being. But what I've heard from, I've never met him, right? But everybody who's worked with Preston has said it's been something that's like completely changed their career because it allows them to get better. So I really respect that about coaches who have, basically can do whatever they want. They can kind of retire whenever they want. Same thing. Like, I've always heard amazing things about Tommy Moffitt, right? These guys can always they have options, but they still stay within strength and conditioning and still invest time into people who are going to be future strength coaches. And then it becomes fun because you have a gnarly coaching tree. I mean, you guys have been crushing it for Preston, with the success y'all have had, you and Pat.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Well, I mean, at one time in that room, right, so it was me, Dan Apodaca, who's at Oklahoma State women's
Yeah.
basketball, Preston, obviously, success he's had in the schools he's been at, Justin McClelland, who's now at Villanova, and Pat, who's at Charlotte. And it's just like, to think back at it, you're like, oh my God, like, we had some studs in there,
Yeah.
and we were all, Justin was working with the women, me and Dan were assistants, Pat was an intern, and obviously Preston was the director, and we're just rolling through it. And so it's unique, and it's cool to keep up with those guys because, it was a shared experience, and now we all branched off in, different places and have different rooms and different problems and all that stuff. And to keep up and talk to each other, and because we all have a similar mindset and have sounding board, is great. It's invaluable because obviously, I was there for 18 months or whatever it ended up being at the end. But you have those guys for life to have your back and bounce ideas off of, so you don't sound crazy.
Yeah. Well, it's a cohort, really. At the end of the
Right.
day, like it's just people who you have trust in and know that they're going to lead you in the best way possible, and be honest with you as well too, right? When things may not be going exactly how you want. I had the same process at Tennessee. All those guys have way better jobs than I do at this point. So it's cool to be able to work with. Coaches who are all dedicated and all have that similar mindset. And I feel like you can find a good class of people within each of those, like you just mentioned with your class at Florida. Now, I mentioned the success piece. I've got to bring it up. I'm curious to hear about it myself, especially as a fellow mid-major strength coach. How was March Madness for you when y'all went to the Final Four?
Yeah, that's a great segue from the Preston piece because he was in the Final Four that year too. So
Yeah.
they played in the game after us. So starting backwards, right, 0.7 seconds on the clock. Kid from San Diego State heaves up a mid-range jumper, which that's what we preached in the program here at the time is hard middies, and he drills it right, and we lose to potentially go to the national championship game. And I come off the floor. As I'm coming off the floor, the first person I see is Preston, and he's going to warm his guys up, and he's like, "Tough one. Good luck." And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
man,
Really
like
tough, dude.
what, like crazy. And then so I look in the first row. Well, Pat got tickets from Preston, so he's sitting in what was turning into the Miami Hurricanes section, but it's all San Diego State fans. Pat apparently got knocked to the ground by the kid's family because they stood up so quick, and he just got leveled. And so they're sitting with two other strength coaches that we're buddies with that own a gym in Scottsdale. It's just like a full circle moment. It's funny to think about now. At the moment, I was I'm so mad. I'm like, oh my god,
Yeah.
I can't believe this ended. And yeah, so it's just funny how it works out. But that month, man, it was. I tell everybody, I remember seeing people. I don't remember where I saw you or when I saw you or what we talked about, but it was the most special month of my life, man. You can't put money on it. It's what we all work towards, and it's just such a flash in the pan of just everything going right at the right time, right? It's in terms of not having injuries, in terms of the guys loving each other, in terms of the coaching staff loving each other, and it's just things that are so not tangible in terms of you can't say, oh, well, we got the best shooter or we got the best offense or we just figured it out, man. It was awesome. And selfishly, it was really special for me because we played at Madison Square Garden for the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight. So my parents were there, and we're staying in the Marriott Marquis in Times Square, and so it's like things growing up in New York, you wish you could be a part of because I grew up watching the Big East tournament when it was in MSG, right? And that's just like the pinnacle for me for basketball. So selfishly, I mean, it was just the coolest being in New York. I don't remember Columbus that well, the first round, the first two games, except for obviously the buzzer beater against Memphis that everybody talks about, and then, but no, New York was just like special because we went straight from Columbus the first two rounds. So we win both games. And then Coach May's like, hey, we want to go to New York straight away. And I'm like, let's do it. Like, let's go. Most people be like, no, we got to go home. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, the guys train, we'll figure it out, but it was just to take it all in. And so we went to New York. We got hooked up by the guys at LIU Brooklyn. We practiced there. We lifted there. So we might have lifted 4 or 5 times the entire month of March. We were home probably for 3 nights the month of March. So it went by really quick. The days were long, but the weeks were short for sure. Like it was incredible. And like I said, it was completely invaluable. And obviously it makes your resume look a little different if you want to talk selfishly, but those memories, you'll have forever.
Well, it's just so cool. One, because I think the expectation for mid majors, if we're being 100% honest, and even versus Sun Belt to American, this may be a little bit different, but the expectation here is, can we make the tournament? Like it's can we get into the NCAA tournament? That's the big deal. Now if we get to the tournament, right, the expectation is we're going to continue to win and keep going. But if we're here at the beginning of the season and we got guys coming in starting next week, like ultimately it's, are we getting to the tournament? Are we going to be successful? Are we going to win our specific conference tournament? So then for a mid major to come in and like you said, beat Memphis, which is fantastic, right? That's within your conference. But then what was it? It was Farley Dickinson next.
Yep, FDU was next,
Yep,
and
and
they had the
then
upset of the century. So
yeah,
we were,
upset
we
of the
were the
century.
villains
So you're
that beat
terrified.
them up.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
exactly,
Yep.
right. And then you go and beat. It was Tennessee next, right?
Tennessee was next. Yep.
And then it's Tennessee. that has just got to be surreal. Like to be like, I knew we were good, and like I almost went through the same thing when we played Auburn. Right here, we played Auburn here, which we had home court advantage. It makes a big difference, right? But I remember thinking before the game, I was like, we're gonna win the game. I can just feel it, right? But then like when you win, I was like, holy, I can't believe we actually won, you know.
Right.
And so then to just experience that over and over again and watch your guys to conquer and just be confident and be themselves. I'm sure it's once in a lifetime, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, I tell everybody that year, we went 35-4. We had a 20-game win streak and we had an 11-game win streak. The games we lost, you kind of look up and you're like, how did we lose? And I've never had that feeling before in college
Yeah.
basketball because it's such a crazy sport, right? So every time we'd get into a huddle, that you were just like, we're going to win this game. Even the games we lost, because I think there was one game that we lost by double digits. We only lost 2 games by double digits in 2 years. So the one was Ole Miss was our second game of my first year here. That was the Final
Yeah.
Four year. And then our last game against Northwestern in the tournament this year. So you're talking about 18 months apart. You haven't lost by double digits. So we're in every single game. And a lot of time we won the close ones. In the Final Four year, I think we're 11-1 in games decided by 5 points or less. So you're in every single game and every single time out, you're looking around and you're like, oh, dude, these guys got it. Like,
Yeah.
there's no question. So yeah, it was unbelievably unique. And when I knew that we were really good, it was when we beat Florida. It was the third game of the year. And because just like the tenacity of our guys, the togetherness of our guys, they didn't care who scored. You know, and you could just carry the momentum through the year, and whoever had the high hand got the ball, and it was just perfect. Everything was just perfect about it. It was unbelievable.
Well, that's why I love basketball so much. And like you said, you weren't playing on basketball, all of a sudden you get thrust into it, and then you get to learn about this sport. And it was the exact same experience for me. I thought I was going to be the New York Jets strength and conditioning coach and retire and Florham Park and live the best life ever, right? And now I'm in Boone, North Carolina, working with basketball. It threw me completely for a loop. I knew nothing about basketball, but to watch this sport, I think is so beautiful because exactly what you just mentioned. Like, if your guys are together and if your guys truly care about each other, you can take down anybody. You can beat any team on any given night. And there's an opportunity because the threshold and the difference between even a Division I to a Division II basketball player is not super significant, right? And even from a mid major to a Power Five player, there's a difference certainly, but when you look at it versus football, right, it's way different situation. In basketball, anybody can beat anybody anytime, and so ultimately, if you guys are together, it's a really, really fun experience to watch people do their thing, not be selfish, be a team, and win because of that, right? And it's all the things that you preach as a coach. It's all the things that you try to emphasize over and over again when you're trying to build your culture is, can we do these things? And if we do these things right, then we are going to win. And then actually watching it be able to happen, it's a really, really fun experience. In the close games, I hate it, man. You talk about being within 11-1 within 5 point games, like we played so many games last year that were too close. Like winning sometimes wasn't even fun because it would just come down to the last minute every single time, and it just got stressful. But overall, the thrill of being the strength coach on the sidelines is just so exciting to me. That's what I love the most about basketball.
Yeah, no, it's good that we sit at the end of the bench because I cannot hide my facial expressions. I'm very animated. I don't jump up and down like a crazy person, but I mean, I'll make some pretty ridiculous faces. I get called out from it, by
Yeah,
like our donors who sit front row and they're like, "Man, we just watch you. You're hilarious to watch." And I'm like, "I know." I'm like, "Thank God I don't sit all the way up the bench because I get not way too into it. Like again, I'm not a crazy person waving towels, all that stuff." But if there's bad calls or our guy does something, like I can't help myself but make a
yeah, yeah,
face, and it's entertaining, man. Like to see our guys do their thing, and I think right now obviously we're in summer, and summer is my end season, is what I say, and to see all the work come to fruition, because everybody in the country works hard, right? Everybody in the country works hard. Even if you quote unquote don't work hard, you still show up every day, and you train and you go to practice, and that's inherently difficult. But I think what I got to see was how much intentionality matters and how much you can get lost. And to go back to my first boss in college, don't major in the minors, how you can kind of get lost in the minors. And we didn't charter, we didn't have technology, we didn't eat the best food or do this or do that. But we adjusted for all of those things, right? We adjusted practice based on our travel. We adjusted for how many meals we could get, the guys on the road based on what we ate previously. And it was constant adjustment as everybody rowing the boat in the same direction. Um, and not getting caught up in the things that necessarily don't matter. At the end of the day, you guys just got to love each other. You got to play basketball, and you got to have really good players. Really, is
Yeah.
what it comes down to. So it was unique, man. It was definitely unique.
I've had coaches before in film the next day break down. Like one time they were like, I just want everybody here to guess how many fist bumps Connor's going to go for here after this, or whatever. I can't remember. This was at Tech, but it was a women's player hit like a three, like last second for us to go up, and like literally we get to four, and the coach is like, surely not another, and then just bam, the fifth one. So it's always fun. I love being on the bench, and there's not much you can really do, besides that, help guys warm up if they've been sitting down for a little bit. We know they're about to go back in, or get Gatorade for everybody else. Otherwise, you're kind of just a spectator there to give some good high fives. So it's
No,
it's always good
it's
being
nice
on
to
the
kick
bench.
it, man. You could just kick it on the
Yeah,
bench.
yeah. Like they talk about adjustments. I'm like, man, I got no clue. I'm not adjusting anything down here. I'm just in my space. But
Yeah.
um, one thing I am curious about too. You talk about getting into summer training this year. I've experienced coaching changes a couple times and working with new head coaches. But as you know, in basketball specifically, there's a strong alignment between the strength coach and the head coach. How do you approach going into your this new year with having a new head coach? Have you made any major changes within your program, or is it kind of same course Zane's always been on?
Yeah, so you always have to adjust, right? You have to feel out the head coach and kind of see what their expectation is, see how they practice. And, I haven't got a good feel in terms of the physicality of practice yet. I've seen a little bit, last week. We just haven't had a full roster or the ability to really play 5-on-5 and get up and down. And guys are obviously all over the place physically. Because with this transfer portal, guys are coming in at different times. We have a lot of international players this year, so guys are coming even more at different times and trying to play for their respective countries in U20 or U23 or whatever it is. So it's been unique for sure. What I've seen out of this staff is just unbelievable support. Unbelievable support. Like he came into me first day. He came up to me and he was like, "Hey, I heard from Charlie Melton at Baylor that you're really great." And I'm like, I don't really know Charlie, which is awesome. Like it was a testament that he did his homework, which I respected right away. Like he wanted to see, like, is this guy good? And so shout out to Charlie. Thank you. Appreciate it. I think he lectured for us one time when I was at UMass, and it's probably the only interaction I've had with him. And he seems like a great guy. And, but they come in and they train 3 to 4 times a week as a staff, 6 or 7 guys. To kind of feel me out, see how we do things here, which I love. It's great for them to kind of get away, and it's great for the guys to see that they train too, and it's great for them to see me in a different light, and understand like there's a system to what I do. So if you guys come in and say, hey, we want to do 30 minutes upper cardio, blah, blah, and you can throw everything at me, I'm going to figure it out for you, and we're going to have a good training session. So, the support has been unbelievable. But the biggest thing and the biggest change I've made this summer is kind of going towards the high major model in terms of we're going more towards groups and we're going more towards individualized training. The reason I can do that is my staff is great. My staff has grown. So I have a GA, I have an assistant director, and I have an assistant. They have their respective sports, but at any time when I need them, they're willing to jump in and help. And then we have 2 interns. We had 3, but we have 2 interns. And now that they're caught up to speed, I can do even more. So we have 5 or 6 different programs within 2 groups. When we get to the normal season or get into the school year, we have limited access to the weight room just because we have all Olympic sports. So we have our hour a day as a team. So it's completely different in the season. So it's been unique this summer to be able to kind of individualize things. And I think it's going to give us a huge advantage because I have such a good staff and the staff believes in me. And if I need more time or this or that, they're willing to adjust and push back practice. So he's kind of giving me the keys to the Ferrari in June, which again is invaluable to what I do because the ability to adjust and the ability to get these guys to where they need to be able to play is going to be at a high level.
Well, man, the relationship between the sport coaches is just so key, right? And it's interesting. I'm doing a Zoom project right now, or whatever it be, cohort. Maybe we could call it as well to use that word for the second time. It's the second time I've ever said that word in my life. But we we meet, and it's actually half basketball coaches, half strength coaches, and we're working in basketball. And so it's been so interesting to hear their opinions on how they view their strength coaches, and not right, wrong, or indifferent, but ultimately it's interesting that the basketball coaches don't really understand what the strength coach that can truly provide, right? Unless that relationship is unlocked, and then you can see what that can look like in the future. Because ultimately, especially with my experience in basketball, I don't have the basketball eye, man. Like I don't, like I'm not seeing half the things that you guys see on the court, right? And so if you can give me feedback on what physical skills he actually needs to get that done, and I can individualize this program like you just mentioned, then it's going to make a world of difference. And then in your skill sessions, you're not going to be wondering, okay, well, why are you getting blown by, on this hard closeout every single time, right? Whatever it may be, you can ultimately make those tweaks and make sure that the coaches can actually coach what they're trying to do. And so having that relationship is key, and the keys to the Ferrari is key as well, to not even try to make a pun out of it, because you're the expert, you're the head coach of the weight room, and they're the head coach of the court. And so ultimately you guys have to be in communication with each other, and you have to work well so you can get the best product for the athletes possible.
Yeah, I mean, and that's been the greatest piece is that he's got a group chat. It says Zane Crew. That's the entire coaching staff and me. And number one in that list is, hey, what time are we training as a staff? But number two is, obviously checking in on the guys and seeing where they're at. And he randomly texted the group sometime last week and was like, hey, if so and so kid dunks, he's a little 5'11" guard, dunks in 5-on-5 in practice or a game, Zane's getting Versace shades. I said, well, I'm going to look like Pitbull on the bench because wait till he's got fresh legs. And so I tell the kid, and not 2 days later, 5-on-5 to end the game, comes up,
Oh,
dunks it, and I'm standing on the baseline. And I'm never on the baseline. I'm always off to the side. So I just happen to be on the baseline talking to our athletic trainer. Kid dunks it right in front of me, and he points me out. He's like, I got you. Gives me a huge chest bump. And then we start giving him the goggles to the head coach. You know what I mean? So, like, that stuff, it's just unique. I've never experienced that to that level of just full 1000% support all day, every day, 24/7, and just wanting to be involved and up to date on the guys and where they're at physically, mentally, emotionally. These guys just do it at such a high level. So it's been an awesome transition, because I had a great staff before. Like the staff before, that was here, obviously we did unbelievable things. And this staff, you have high expectations for staff coming in after the success we had and win 60 games in 2 years and all that. And these guys didn't skip a beat. Definitely has not gone backwards. These guys are awesome. So it's been great. I'm really grateful.
well, it just makes it fun, man. Like, at the end of the day, like, this job is fun. Like, sometimes I feel like I have to remind myself that, like, especially if it's just gonna be a tough day coming up. I know I've got a million groups, whatever it may look like for the day. That's kind of a thorn in my side, but like, the job is fun. Like, how many people would kill to be able to watch every practice, right? And just watch basketball all day, and then lift some weights, and then get a dinner with the team afterwards, right? Like, these experiences are fun, and the better relationship you have with your head coach and the coaching staff, the even more fun that you can have with it, right? And then you have your inside jokes and just small things that just make every day lighter and different. And every day being different is just fun for me. So I'm glad that you're having that experience. I've got it over here at App, and it makes the world of difference. It makes every day like I want to come in.
Yeah, no, for sure. It reignited the flame for me.
Mm.
I don't feel like I tailed off at any point in my career. Like I've always loved what I do, but there's just a different pop around the building right now, and it's
Yeah,
contagious, and it makes you want to just kind of dive back in and remember kind of why you got involved in this to begin with. And it's a change I didn't know I needed. Almost, it's been great.
that's awesome, man. Well, I'm very happy to hear that. And thank you for coming on, dude. It's been a long time coming. I'm excited that we were able to get you on and I speak with you. I've heard nothing but amazing things, and I can see why. If anybody wants to follow you on social media or reach out, ask you any questions, what would be the best way to do that?
Yeah, I think really the only one is Instagram that I really kind of active on. I need to do a better job, but it's Zane Zane _ Scott SCOTT 2, which is number 2. And next time I hop on here, we're going to talk a little more strength and conditioning. This was a little subjective, which is all good, man.
Yeah,
Anybody can come down anytime and see how we train, and we train hard and we're actually intelligent in what we do. But I'm definitely a lot more conversational, so I appreciate the time.
oh, absolutely. And I'm not very intelligent with what I do. So I like to just avoid the programming. I like to just talk to dudes as dudes,
I love it.
and just hang out. So, well, awesome, man. Thank you, Zane. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it.